Hey guys, what's up? It's Sierra the Festive Bohemian, and today in this video I'm going to be sharing some LECA pros and cons while simultaneously transferring this Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. So honestly, my approach to LECA has just been whatever's easiest. Call me lazy if you'd like. I like to describe myself as being chill. So saying that, my Hoyas and my aeroids such as monsteras, this Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, I can say it once good and that's all I got. Moving on. Philodendrons, your alocasias, pothos, ZZ plants to do the best in LECA, and I believe that's because a lot of them, they grow up trees, they're used to having their roots exposed, so I feel like that environment, the LECA environment, just makes more sense for aeroids in general, and also Hoya since they're trailing climbing epiphytic plants. I have no trouble personally whatsoever transferring these plants, and I feel like they take off in LECA. For me, those plants are the easiest. But that being said, I have seen a lot of people on Facebook, Reddit groups talking about and sharing their calatheas, ferns, begonias, whatnot in semi-hydro, which is fine if you do that. Personally, I had one calathea in LECA. At first it seemed to be doing really well, but I feel like I really had to be on top of the watering with him. So for me, it's just, I find it easier taking care of a calathea in soil because it just doesn't dry up as fast as the LECA does. That's just been my personal experience. Those plants like begonias that I do not necessarily want to go through the process of converting, I have been propagating them in water and then transferring them to LECA and then keeping the mother plant in soil. Now obviously you can propagate a calathea or a fern in LECA. Those are going to have to be done by division, so really if you want to get those guys in LECA, you've got to clean those roots. So it's just really up to you if that is worth it. Last thing before I get in to the nitty-gritty, the pros and cons, there are so many ways I've seen people approach this LECA situation. People have all sorts of different ways. Some people are very technical with it. They are very precise about their pH, about everything. I'm not one of those people. Again, my approach is whatever is easiest. Let's get into it. Con number one is cleaning roots. This part sucks, okay? It's not fun. I mean, unless you can put on, some true crime or whatever and listen to that while I do it to make it a little bit more enjoyable, but overall it's not a super fun process, especially when your roots are super fibrous. The good thing about Hoyas is that they have smaller root systems, so you're not necessarily cleaning as much. The more fibrous the plant is, the harder it is to clean. That is definitely con number one, cleaning these damn roots. Now I've cleaned these off already, removed the majority of the dirt, and now I'm going to be a little bit more meticulous and get a toothbrush, brush away more of that dirt that I see. Some people don't use a toothbrush, some people recommend it, and yes, it will injure your roots. It will. I have a video all about root rot, and I go into even the whole LECA thing with root rot, so if you want to check that out, I'll link it here, and I'll also have links to everything I used and all sorts of good information down in the description. Point is that the roots do grow back. You don't want to damage too much of your plant because, obviously if you damage too much of the root system, your plant's not going to be in balance anymore. There's going to be too much foliage for the roots to handle. But personally, I'd rather remove as much of the soil from my roots than worry too much about the damage the toothbrush does, because it just stays moist on those roots. You know, it just stays there, and the LECA creates this moist environment so that soil then rots that root rot. That's why root rot is the number one reason people lose their plants when transferring to LECA, because of the soil. So after you convert, you also just want to make sure that your roots are staying nice and warm, because that's the environment that they prefer. Con number 2 is going to be that plants, especially with smaller root systems, can be difficult to balance in the LECA. So you may even want to try a smaller LECA. They have mini LECA, or you can get some pon, which you can make your own, or you can buy it. It can be pricey. I looked once to buy it online and it was sold out at the time, so I never looked again. I did find one of those lucky finds. I found some pon at the thrift store, so I get to get some there, which I put my variegated Hoya compacta, put him in some pon, and he's been doing great. He's the only Hoya I have, and well, the only plant I have in actual pon. Otherwise, the other plants are in the DIY pon, which I'm still playing around with, so I don't really want to go too deep into that right now. I do want to also mention that a lot of people do find that putting their plant after they cleaned it here, putting it in water, personally, that isn't really much of a help to me, although I do propagate my plants that way. So I'll take a cutting, put it in water, and then put it in LECA, but I don't personally feel any benefit from putting this into water and then transferring it, because I have success just transferring it. But if you are trying to transfer calatheas, and that's what people that have been successful with calatheas are doing, then, you know, maybe try it. I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. Before I get into potting up my plants, I do want to say rinsing your LECA is definitely a con if you live in an apartment or a space where going outside isn't necessarily very easy for you. For me, because I have a backyard and all my plants are kept in my patio, which is basically outside, it's really easy for me to rinse my LECA outside with the hose and rinse off the soil from my plants. Whereas if you're in an apartment, you're a little bit more limited, because rinsing the LECA in your sink, all that dust that comes off can get clogged in the pipes. It's not good for them. So you don't want to do that. But I have seen a lot of people on these Facebook groups and Reddit. I know I keep saying that, but I have seen a lot of people on these groups also talk about creative ways to rinse their LECA. So unfortunately, I don't really have any of those because I never needed to figure that out. But if you do live in an apartment and you really want to try a LECA, I recommend looking first into how people are.
I want to show you her.
Oh, your PJs! You got new PJs? Can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi! Hi, everybody! Cheese! Are you gonna go take a nap?
Yep.
I love you.
Come on. Say your kiss. Give me a kiss. Come here. You want me a kiss?
Where are you going? Oh, are you my audience now? Oh, you want to be the cameraman? Camera woman.
You want me a kiss?
I love you. So, if you live in an apartment and you want to convert to LECA, I definitely recommend first looking on YouTube and searching, ways that you can rinse your LECA in an apartment, because you want to see if that's something that you're willing to do first. Now let's go ahead and pot these up. Here we go. As you can see, there's still a little bit of dirt left, but I'm happy with what I was able to remove. Alright guys, so con number 4 is after transferring your plants to LECA, there is the possibility of losing leaves or root rot. You know, it can be stressful. So personally, if you are happy with your plants in soil, you have developed a routine, and just thinking about transferring your plants to maybe make them happier or what, I just don't see the point, because okay, if you're happy, then there's really, there's no point to convert. But if you're looking for a new way, maybe you struggle with overwatering your plants, you lose a lot of plants to root rot, that's when I would say make the switch, right? So it really comes down to what kind of plant person you are. Overall, I feel like LECA is the easier approach because you could literally write a manual on how, although, you know, like I mentioned earlier, everyone's manual may be a little bit different, but I feel like that manual would be much easier to follow than one with plants in soil, because overall the care from plant to plant is going to be pretty much the same. There may be a few differences. You won't want to let your, more moisture-loving plants dry out as much as you would probably your Hoyas, but my pothos, my aroids, everything, I let the reservoir completely dry up before I add more water, and they're all happy as can be. So there's not as much a new plant parent will need to know when starting LECA compared to soil. I feel like there's just a little bit more knowledge that comes with the soil. So one of the biggest reasons I decided to convert my plants to LECA was that I just really hate sticking my finger deep into the soil when it comes to, those plants that prefer to dry out, such as Hoyas, because with my begonia, I stick my finger in, and the depth of my finger, if it feels dry, then I'll water it, or if the plant looks like it's thirsty, I'll water it. But with my Hoyas and succulents and other plants that prefer to dry out a little bit more, you can't just stick your finger in. You've got to really make sure that it's kind of fully dry, because I let my Hoyas basically fully dry out, and they have the moisture meters. Personally, I don't like those. I don't know what it is, but the moisture meter just isn't my thing. I like to really know. I don't trust that little gadget. So I, really dig my finger down deep, or I have to look at the bottom of the pod and suss it out that way, where LECA is just really straightforward, The reservoir is dry. There's no water in there whatsoever. Water. Con number 5, because LECA is an inorganic substrate, it's, these little clay balls, you do need to be on top of your fertilizing game. Now, that being said, I am not on top of my fertilizing game. I try to be, but there's been instances where I just haven't been on point with my fertilizing, and my plants have been just fine. I also don't test the pH of my water. Now, I do use rainwater and I use filtered water. I've gone between using both, and I have no issues with either of them. My plants seem to be doing just fine, and for me, it's an extra step I don't want to take anyways. So, never done the pH testing thing. If I'm not saying don't do it, because pH obviously does affect your plants, and having good pH is going to make your plants happier, but I'm just saying it's not necessary, and I don't do it. Con number 6. Now, small plants, such as the ones I'm transferring today, are easier to convert to LECA. Now, I do have, my largest plant is my Monstera Delicioso, and it is in LECA, and I converted it from soil to LECA as a big plant, and I'm telling you, it was definitely a difficult process. But after that initial transfer, trying to up pot, to me it's pretty comparable to if you were to do it in soil, because just working with bigger plants is harder in general. But initially the conversion, if you have large plants, trying to convert them to LECA is kind of ties in back to the hard to convert thing of having to clean your plant roots, but just wanted to mention that as well. Now, con number 7, soil is compostable. If you lose a plant, you throw the whole plant out, right? With as the LECA, you can't dispose of it in the same way. But that leads me into pro number 1, which is that LECA is reusable. Probably my favorite pro, because although I've already ordered 2 50-liter bags and haven't really reused any of my LECA because it's all in my plants and my plants keep getting bigger, so I just keep using more LECA, I take that back. I have, killed a plant in LECA, so I did have to reuse that LECA, which they say to boil. If you have any root rot issues going on, you will want to boil it or disinfect it in some way to prevent that root rot from transferring to the next plant. The fact that you're able to reuse the LECA in the long run, I believe this is going to make LECA a bit more affordable than soil, because although you can reuse soil by like putting it in the oven, cooking it, whatever, I just don't do that. I'm too lazy for that. I just throw the whole plant out and buy more soil. Pro number 2 is that with your plants in LECA, you have more control over them. Let's say, like recently, there was like a little spider mite outbreak with a few of my plants, and those plants that were in LECA, I just completely showered. You can take it out, completely soak it in some Azamax or Neem Oil, whatever. I just feel like when you do have a pest infestation, handling it when it's in LECA has just been easier for me, and the plants that weren't in LECA, I had to wait until they needed more water. But like if you just watered your plant, you really, I guess you could, completely take the plant out of the soil, but when the soil is wet, it just makes things more difficult, if you know what I mean. So if you are looking to get into LECA because you heard that pests aren't a thing, it still definitely is a thing, but one pest you are less likely to get are fungus gnats. So if you do have an issue with that, because fungus gnats like to lay their eggs in that top bit of soil and they don't have any organic matter to feed off of, they aren't going to be as common with your LECA or at all common with your LECA plants. I haven't had them, but other pests can still appear, but trying to get rid of them is going to be easier. I've been treating my spider mites with some neem oil. I've been spraying them every 7 days. Alocasias are known for getting spider mites quite easily. I feel like we finally got over it. Thank goodness. Hoping he's going to come back to life now because he's definitely lost a lot of color. It's been a struggle. Pro number 3. Now, one of the best parts about LECA, and I feel like everybody agrees with me on this one, is just being able to see your roots. You can see those roots growing, so the health of your plant. A lot of the times, you just don't know until it's too late that your plant isn't happy. But with LECA, the roots are visible, you can see them. If they're looking good, your plant is happy, and you can really be that helicopter plant parent, right? You can see, know, and control everything that your plant is doing, and it gives you more peace of mind. Number 4 is that preventing root rot, although it is, common amongst transferring your plants to LECA, because like I mentioned, that soil gets stuck on those roots and it leads to that root rot. But good news is that telling if your plant is suffering from root rot is much easier to do so than if it was in soil. So if your plant is in the LECA and the reservoir is full, but the leaves look droopy and it looks thirsty, that's a telltale sign that your plant is likely suffering from root rot. What you can do is remove that reservoir and let it dry, see how it recovers after that, or probably the best thing you can do is take your plant out of the LECA, expose it to the air, get it some oxygen, put it back in the LECA. You can put some cinnamon powder on it or do a hydrogen peroxide soak. I have more on root rot in my root rot video, so make sure to check that out. Pro number 5, you have more options for pots. You can put your plants in old candle holders. You can put them in drainage pots and put the drainage pots in a cache pot. You can use a drainage pot and then use like a bowl or anything you have to use as a reservoir. You can just get really creative with your containers. So I've been lazy and I haven't really been drilling holes to drain my plants, like a reservoir hole. I've got a short video on how to drill holes in your glass that you can click on right here if you want to know how to do that. The roots just tend to grow very quickly, so they're only in one glass for a short time before I move them into another glass, so I don't even end up flushing them. I just refill the water when it gets low, and then when it's time to move it into a bigger pot, I'll move it into a clean pot, and that's been working for me. And this also means less mess at home, right? Because you don't need to worry about any watermarks or water stains on coffee tables, and I like that. Pro number 6 is that if you change your mind and you don't want to have all your plants in LECA later, you can always use it as an amendment to your soil as well to create more airspace, which also helps improve the drainage. And you can even use it in the bottom of terrariums, which I've done just as a bottom layer. A lot of options on how you can use LECA too. You don't have to just put your plant straight into LECA, you can experiment. Pro number 7, last but definitely not least, is that when you go on vacation, I've already had to do this once, and I'm telling you, the instructions are much simpler with plants in LECA. Whoever's watching your plants, they don't even have to be plant people. You just say, hey, check the water reservoirs of these plants, and if the reservoirs are dry, water them. If they are not, leave them alone. Easy as pie. I went on vacation, I mentioned this in another video, and when I came back, the only plant I lost was in soil, but it wasn't even my partner's fault. It was my fault because I'd just gotten that plant and I forgot to tell him about it. That was super sad. It was a string of turtles, and I was super happy when I got that guy, so super upset when I lost him. But all my other plants, I wasn't gone for a long time, so my plants in soil, I did water before I left, and I told him to leave them alone because you just can't, like, how do you explain to somebody that's not a plant person, hey, water this one, don't water this one. Lift this one up, if it's light, water it. If it's not, don't. You get what I'm saying. You get the point. It becomes a lot, especially if you have a large plant collection. At the end of the day, this video is not to convince you to use LECA. This video is to help you decide whether or not it's really worth it for you, because I don't believe it's worth it for everybody. If you're a successful plant parent, you have no problem with your plants, this is just me, Tanya, don't do it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below for some more LECA videos and plant styling videos, DIYs. Did I leave a con out? Let me know in the comments below. Share with me your experience, and thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.